Welcome, everyone.
Hello, R.E.A.L.
It is delightful to see you all.
Hello.
So I think Kabir and I might be matching. There are some similarities there.
Indeed.
Good idea, though. Yeah, I think
This is so
even though I'm home, I think this is the first time attending an event from home. I feel like I'm almost there. I think that the outfit does make a difference.
Can you guys see me?
Hello,
Yeah.
Nancy.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Long time no see.
Oui, comment ça va, Mirez?
Ça va et toi?
Très bien, grâce à Dieu. Ça
Okay.
va.
So did you find the Sherwell, Kabir?
Yeah.
You know that it's the same word we use in Lebanon, Serwel and Kamis. I saw you both
wow.
writing this. So it's the same words.
It came to our culture from the Middle East. So
I think so.
I don't have anything
think so,
Haitian
indeed.
to wear.
So this is my Lebanese outfit.
Wow.
Well, it's gorgeous.
Look at that. That's gorgeous.
So I played the game. Have you said? So I did it.
I needed advance notice. I don't have there's no typical Haitian outfit, but there is one that they have in the countryside.
I really had to run after the outfit because it's been, somewhere since 40 years and I had completely forgotten about it.
And you can still fit into it, Mirez. I'm very impressed.
That's
I am.
exactly what I was going to say, Louise. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Louisa. I mean, I haven't changed. No, in terms of figure, it's okay. Oh, it's Diana. Diana, yes.
Yeah.
It's still
Hi.
C'est
fitting.
moi. I'm really jealous.
Hi,
Hello, Naila.
Hi, Naila.
I have Naila. Naila, I put my Lebanese outfit. Kabir said you should do so. I did it. I played the game. You haven't put a Lebanese outfit.
I don't know why.
How are you, Naila?
I'm fine. I'm in Beirut. All is
Yeah.
fine with all the challenges that you all know.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you're safe and your family's safe?
Yes, thanks God. Thanks God, we are safe. Yes,
It's a terrible thing.
we survived the blast, and we are healthy and safe, all of us. Thank you.
Thanks, God.
So everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for joining. We are so thrilled to be beaming in with all of you as if we could be together, but in virtual for now while it's still safe. Welcome to the R.E.A.L launch. My name is Rekha Rangachari on behalf of Kabir Dugal, Krina Baltag, and myself, co-chairs. I'm going to kick this off this morning, Eastern time. And I begin, of course, by thanking all of you. We are excited to share the next 90 minutes with you as we begin a conversation on diversity, intersectionality, and racial equality. Today is an auspicious day in US history. We honor Martin Luther King Jr., an activist and minister who continues to imbue our conversations on access and advocacy. These are key tenets of the R.E.A.L movement, racial equality for arbitration lawyers, and thus apropos that we are together today. Martin Luther King Jr. was a private citizen who made a global impact. With one voice, he united many. In a speech, his first at the Lincoln Memorial before his famous I Have a Dream speech, speaking on voter access, he said on racial equality, "We must realize that we are grappling with the most weighty social problem, and in grappling with such a complex problem, there is no place for misguided emotionalism." At a later oration, he affirms, "I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality." Inspired by his actions and his legacy, today We build a dialogue and process-oriented action to talk the talk and walk the walk within international law generally and international arbitration specifically. In a short amount of time, through your energy and your enthusiasm, R.E.A.L has a strong foundation. We have representation across diversity categories, including gender, geography, and ethnicity, in addition to intersectionality. You are our members and allies. You are our ambassadors and our steering committee, and you represent our partner organizations. We now count over 70 arbitral institutions and organizations, your organizations, as our R.E.A.L friends. I want to give a shout out here to Mohammed Smesan, who is helping us as our platform host. Thank you so much, Mohammed. He's a student at Stockholm University. But although the image is very small, the wealth of the support from all of these organizations and more being added as we speak is momentous. Indeed, an inauguration, virtual or otherwise, is a beginning. The work follows thereafter and with vigor. We will do great things together through your support, hard work, candid and direct conversation, real talk, and the belief that our practice can only improve if all stakeholders have a seat at the table. Through unarmed truth and unconditional love, we begin to address conscious and unconscious bias at global, regional, and local levels. In the coming weeks and months, you will hear more about the committees that will become activation points of R.E.A.L's movement, mentorship, community building, and networking, conferences, events, and publications, amongst others. We will ask you to voice your interest in these committees and join as we build active, goals-oriented working groups. We will be painstaking in the process so that each brick laid advances concrete, cognizable change. And we will borrow from the wheels already in motion, put in place by each of you and our R.E.A.L friends to map diversity, inclusion, and intersectionality in our work on racial equality. Towards access, I'm thrilled to share with you 3 examples of how we begin walking the walk. These are R.E.A.L opportunities. First, our mentoring scheme. It will launch later this month with details to follow. Please stay tuned and let's get real. Second, Jus Mundi will provide 3 scholarships for a year's free subscription to their global legal database, focusing on members from Africa, Asia, and Latin America. By reference, Jus Mundi is the world's largest and most comprehensive database dealing with public international law and international arbitration. And finally, GAR's interactive Women in Arbitration, to be hosted on 2nd February, offers 3 complimentary seats to R.E.A.L members. Let's operationalize change in our community. Paradigm shifts do not happen overnight or in a bubble, and we will get there methodically with your help. With that, let's get real, let's actualize change, and let's begin walking. Now is the time. Without further ado, allow me to introduce to you our first keynote. Judge Navinathan Navi Pillay is a South African jurist. Judge Pillay is a woman of many firsts in her distinguished career. She was the first non-white woman to open her own law practice in her native Natal province, Durban. During this time, she also co-founded Equality Now, an international women's rights group. She was the first non-white woman of the High Court of South Africa. Soon thereafter, she was elected by the United Nations General Assembly to serve as judge to the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, later becoming the president of this tribunal. In 2003, she was elected to the first panel of judges of the International Criminal Court, assigned to the Appeals Division. From here, she was appointed to the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, and she served in that term as commissioner for 6 years, from 2008 to 2014. Amongst other titles, she now serves as president of the Advisory Council of the International Nuremberg Principles Academy, dedicated to the advancement of international criminal law and human rights. It is our great honor to welcome Judge Pillay and to invite her to take the floor. Judge Pillay, please.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm delighted to join you for the launch of R.E.A.L. And of course, I share your goals of access for equal participation in international processes and advocacy to raise awareness and redress lack of diversity in the field of arbitration. And of course, I would share those goals, having born and grown up under apartheid South Africa, and as a lawyer for almost 30 years, fighting these oppressive laws until we ended racism and acquired now our democracy. So I have many experiences, first as a belligerent lawyer, but mainly fighting for the rights of people of color and many what we call political trials against dissidents. So I've been asked in 10 minutes to explain why diversity and inclusion matter in international law. So let me say that in my early years, and this is what I also expounded in my doctoral thesis at Harvard University in 1988, all of us used to respond that diversity is important to reflect the reality, to reflect the demographics, and that it was important to have the input from people with different world and life experiences, the experiences of Blacks, of poor people, of women, and all this mattered because South Africa, had an all-white male judiciary for centuries, and they behaved as if that will never ever change. When Nelson Mandela appeared in a magistrate's court in 1962, it was, he was charged for contravening the Racial Hostilities Act. This was before the treason trial. So in that small trial, he declined to plead because he said that he did not expect justice in a system that has the inherent potential for injustice in a racist court. And the magistrate responded bluntly, after all is said and done, there is only one court today, and that is a white man's court. There is no other court. And of course, it was entrenched under apartheid, but we all know that this is a practice. The exclusion of women and Black people occurs in institutions, including international institutions all over the world. I had to address the disparate employment of people from the North and people from developing countries as High Commissioner for Human Rights, for instance. So I want to say that reasoning we used to give, to me, is no longer useful or valid. Today, we speak in terms of rights, because the culture of rights and entitlement has evolved and advanced. We reached heights in 2008 and so on, when I was High Commissioner for Human Rights. Everyone understood to speak in terms of rights. So we have, why do we need diversity? Because people have the right to inclusion, the right of non-discrimination. And discrimination on the basis of race, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, and economic status is pernicious, and courts throughout the world continue to practice that. Now, protest movements of civil society, such as the anti-apartheid movement, and more recently the Me Too campaigns and the Black Lives Matter movements in the United States, reveal that one of the tools of oppression and ensuring that the consciousness of bias is not exposed. One of the tools is to render the victim invisible or non-existent. And by way of example, I was being conferred and one of the honorary doctorates I have received, but this one was from Rhodes University, And the vice chancellor told me with great self-satisfaction that his colleagues had said to him, where on earth did you find a Black woman with these kind of qualifications? So that's what I mean by, we were and we continue to be invisible because it's in the interest of those excluding us to maintain that. I have often been introduced as someone who, against all odds, rose from deprivation to high office, up to UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. And my achievements were often described as exceptional. While that may be true, it nevertheless always makes me flinch to be viewed as an exception. So together with R.E.A.L, I support you in your endeavors to ensure that people achieve their rights, that doors are opened and opportunities facilitated for all to aspire. We don't want exceptions. We want it to be the norm, inclusion. So briefly then, some of my stories in South Africa and internationally, and I will respectfully say to you that, I don't want to comment on each incident, but do see that it involves struggle. Nothing just falls in your lap. If you have to go after this, you have to strategize as lawyers. We worked under apartheid laws, and yet we want, I just saw Kabir's notice there, got distracted a bit. I often felt it was an illusion to think that you can achieve justice under apartheid laws. Nevertheless, we use their own laws to fight each time. So firstly, then I had become a lawyer, but I could not find a job with any law firms. They were mainly white. And I've always said that I was trebly discriminated. Because of race, they said to me, yes, we can't have white secretaries taking instructions from a non-white lawyer. And on gender, well, we see that you've just got married. So what if you have children? And thirdly, on class, what kind of business can you bring in? Is your father a businessman? And so on. And so really, I was forced to then open my own law practice. It was the first for a woman of any color to open a law practice of her own. And there was much skepticism. Even Black colleagues said, you're being very presumptuous because a woman can't run a law firm. So that's how I started. I just want to mention then in the course of these political trials that I was defending, I had to go many times to Robben Island prison where my own clients had a right of appeal going. And that's why I had been granted legal visits to them. And you all understand that that means you can only talk about the case and nothing else. The visits were within sight and out of hearing. But I could see that my clients wanted to tell me about the terrible conditions in the prison. And I listened. We found strategic ways of communicating that. I had to put all the details in my head. And the main thing was one of my clients had submitted a petition to the prison commandant, asking for rights. They wanted to see the prison regulations, and they wanted to study, and they wanted to have access to their lawyers. No one on Robben Island prison, except President Mandela, before he became president, he was a prisoner there. No one had access to lawyers. So when my client handed this petition in, he was sentenced to 6 months in isolation. And he then was able to tell me that. And they wanted me to bring an application to court, but warned me that Mandela did not want such an application to be made because he didn't expect to gain any victories in an apartheid court. He preferred to negotiate with the authorities. I came outside and sought different points of view. And it was a big risk for me, I was a very young lawyer, to bring that application, knowing that it was not fully supported by people inside the prison. However, we succeeded. We didn't have a constitution then. We used the common law. And you know what? We never used the language of human rights. I'm appalled now, having served as High Commissioner for Human Rights, how many more tools we have. So we used the common law, and the order we got with costs against the prison is that prisoners are not property, they have rights, and they must have access to lawyers. If they are alleged to have broken any prison regulation, they must be afforded a trial. So that, and of course the right to study, and they also gain the prison regulations and the right to smoke. But they told me what a huge help this application was, because it then benefited prisoners in all prisons. You know, almost all prisoners were Black. So a little risk that was taken, but it was well worth it. That was in 1975. You know, it was in 1995 that I became the first Black woman and the first attorney to be appointed to the bench. This was acting judge of the bench in my province, Natal. And I got a call on a Saturday morning from President Mandela, who was now president, congratulating me on the appointment and saying it gives him great joy and that he hopes it will be permanent. I mentioned this to tell you about the reaction of the White Bar Council, who were absolutely astounded. Firstly, someone who is an attorney, and then a Black woman. And so they called an urgent meeting. Agenda item 1 was the competence of Pillay. The public took this up in the newspapers and asked the Bar Council, why didn't you question the apartheid judges? Why are you questioning her competence? So they did come monitor me a day or two in the court to see whether I was competent. None of this should affect one's confidence and ability to perform. And then, of course, I became a judge on the United Nations International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. Also a first for South Africa, and thanks to Nelson Mandela, who approved my nomination. So I was one woman out of the first 6 judges who were elected for a 4-year period, and then we were re-elected. For the first 4-year period, I sat as a trial judge on the R.E.A.L rape and sexual violence case. It's widely known for that. And in my second 4 years on the media case on freedom of speech and hate speech and so on, which is very topical today in the United States after the attack on Congress. When do you curtail speech that incites violence? So anyway, I hope that you are familiar with the R.E.A.L jurisprudence, because it's the world's first conviction of genocide, and it's the world's first conviction of rape and sexual violence as genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. And we all know how hard it is to not have precedents and to judge something for the very first time. I don't have time to tell you, but I need to share with you that the presence of women was very, very important in these ad hoc tribunals, wherever a bench delivered judgments on including rape and sexual violence, invariably there was a woman judge on that bench. And when there weren't, like a 3-male bench would say, all right, so they were raped, but they were killed after that, so we're going to deal with the killings and ignore the rape. So believe it or not, that was some of the attitude. So that's a clear illustration then of why diversity matters in international law. Now, I don't know how I'm doing with time. I was supposed to time myself, so I have more to say. I could name you all the women judges who were attacked on appeal and so on, or who faced applications for recusal. Application against me was that I'd asked the first question on the occurrence of rape and sexual violence, and that therefore I must have been biased or influenced by the NGO movement. Another judge from Ghana was attacked because she had previously served as a member of the Committee on the Status of Women, a UN statutory body. So this is what happens when you introduce diversity, whether Black staff or personnel or officials. There's always the extra focus and criticism on them. Now, in the International Criminal Court, that's the world's first court, I was very pleased to serve there on the appeals chamber, and there I participated in decisions on spelling out the rights of victims to have access to participation in court proceedings. Very, very important. It was the first for me because, as you know, in common law systems, we don't have that. Victims don't have a say in there. But here we said, in terms of the Rome Statute, they can have their own legal representatives, they can have right to disclosure of documents, they can have a say in the charges, who is charged and what is charged against. In other words, they have a voice in the courtroom. And we also dealt with compensation for victims. To me, that was a huge opportunity to make public and authoritative determinations on justice being holistic, not just retributive justice, but restorative justice as well. So briefly, that's what happens. Once again, there you are. You put in people who come with various experiences, who identify with victims, and do not come from an elitist class that has no idea about suffering of victims on the ground. So putting people like us into these courts has made a difference on the way we approach matters. So as High Commissioner, I served for 6 years. That's quite right. That was very unusual because it's always a 4-year limit. They don't want a High Commissioner becoming too powerful. Now, suddenly, from being a judge, I'm now an advocate. So I had to learn advocacy, diplomacy, and very strangely, ambassadors said to me, "We like your approach. We think that it's because you are a judge that you listen and you bring a balance to all the reports that you compile in respect of countries." So obviously I could not be judgmental. I had to see how best I could achieve the goals I wanted. For instance, there was an objection by a country, China in fact, about the Committee Against Torture receiving a complaint from a body in opposition to China, but China regarded them as a group that claimed to be an alternate government. So they objected. They said it's not an NGO. And they said to me, well, if you don't do something about this, we're going to pull out of the Committee Against Torture. So I had to speak to the very eminent committee members who are totally independent. I can't tell them what to do. But I said to them, you know, taking the legal point that there is some merit in the argument that this particular body is not an NGO, but mainly saying, what is your goal here? It's to end torture. You want to encourage China to end torture. So therefore you want them in so you can pick your fights, as it were. So that was resolved quite nicely. I am quoted by my successor, Prince Zayed. He became the High Commissioner for Human Rights after me. And I heard him say, and repeat again more recently, that the best advice I gave him is you treat all countries equally. So it doesn't mean that you have to bow to pressure from powerful countries or donor countries. You criticize each and every one of them if it's merited. I brought attention to both civil and political rights and economic, social, and cultural rights, because I found there was a skewed emphasis only on civil and political rights. Developed countries in the North would fund NGOs in the North to focus on developing countries who were suppressing freedom of speech and movement, for instance. And yet the migrants were treated very badly in the backyards of northern countries. And I said the Universal Declaration for Human Rights speaks of all rights of all people, and therefore this office will address all rights equally. And in any event, I fully knew that economic rights are vital for developing countries. So that's one of the things I did. I also raised my criticism against all matters, both the, I called for investigation and disclosure in the killing of Gaddafi, President Gaddafi of Libya, as well as the killing of Osama bin Laden, because I said that particular death violated the UN's anti-terrorism measures. I brought in the issue of LGBTI. For 60 years. That community was struggling to have their rights addressed, and they were blocked. But through the Office of the High Commissioner, I put it on the UN agenda. I constantly focused on countries of conflict, such as Syria, Sudan, South Sudan, Afghanistan, and many of these countries. Sri Lanka was not addressed by any international forum until I put it on the agenda of the Human Rights Council, as well as caste. And India, did not like the idea at all. They felt it was an internal matter, and they put out that I was hostile to India. So you get these pushbacks, but the principle is that caste-based discrimination operates in many countries in south of Mauritania, in Nepal, in islands outside Japan. So I was able, for the very first time in UN history, to bring the issue of caste there, as well as supported the participation of indigenous in the Indigenous World Conference, the very first, and in Agenda 2030, in showing the link between human rights and development. And of course, my successor was stopped from addressing the UN Security Council, as was my predecessor, because the notion was from some members of the Security Council that that's not the place to address human rights. And I went there and said, how can you even deliver on your mandate of peace and security in the world if you do not understand that there are human rights violations and crimes going on, which are alerts to conflicts to come? So would you believe I was invited and I addressed the UN Security Council almost 15 times. So when I left, I was really saddened that they seem to have put a stop to that. Some of the down-to-earth things I did, there were tons of them, but let me describe this one to you. I was in South Sudan, and we flew by UN helicopter to the inaccessible places like the Blue Nile conflict zones, very tribal, very rural. And I sat under the trees with about 20 women. They did not speak the same language. We had like 4 or 5 different translators so that they could communicate amongst themselves and us. And they said to me, do women have rights? Because my husband killed my 12-year-old daughter because she refused to enter into the marriage that he had arranged for her with the 65-year-old man who owned a lot of cows. That was the reason for the marriage. And apparently that is a practice in that whole area. So 2 mothers told me of their daughters being killed by the husband and sons. They knew that the bodies of their daughters were buried in the backyard, and they don't know what to do about it. They tried to speak to the police. So don't we women have rights of our children? So we just had a conversation, and I spoke with them. And a few months later, the ambassador of South Sudan came to see me in my office in Geneva, and he said, something has happened that has never happened before. These women formed a representative group, asked for a meeting with the governor of that province, and demanded their rights. And so this is why I encourage R.E.A.L to continue to persevere, don't give up, because teachers, people of whatever area of struggle need some help and assistance from us. So in conclusion, then, diversity and inclusion matters in international law and in our domestic situations. Those who are traditionally excluded or rendered invisible must strive to be counted and should be helped by initiatives such as R.E.A.L. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Judge Pillay. Thank you for the inspiring words. You're a true model to us, and we're truly, truly beyond grateful for having you today for the R.E.A.L launch. We made known that you traveled a long way to get to an area with access to light, to electricity, to internet. So this speaks even more how you appreciate all these elements and how grateful you are for making this possible. Thank you very much indeed, and a virtual clap of hands from all of us. About 200 people joining us today, colleagues, dear friends, we appreciate it. We are truly grateful for your support. We also wanted to give a shout out to our R.E.A.L ambassadors. All are here present today. Thank you very much, in addition to our R.E.A.L partners. We are also grateful to our R.E.A.L secretaries. There are many amazing people working behind the scenes to make this possible. So we'd like to thank each and all of you. Up next is also without any introduction needed, Mr. Kevin Kim. Welcome and thank you for staying up so late at this time. As you know, Kevin is a senior partner at Peter & Kim in Seoul, and he is joining us today from Singapore. I would give you the floor straight away. Kevin, please.
Thank you. Thank you for your introduction. And Judge Pillay, that was really well articulated speech, and I'm very impressed about your experience and what you achieved so far. And thank you, Karina, Kabir, Leka, having me here today. And good morning, good afternoon, and evening to everyone who has come together on this momentous day to commemorate inauguration of the R.E.A.L. Indeed, the Martin Luther King's Day is apt day to inaugurate R.E.A.L. It'll be remiss on our part to not acknowledge that even in this day and age, we need to have this discussion. Please let me share with a photo, if I can share. Could you see the photo? So sorry about the quality. I took with my phone in one morning at the lane while I was attending a hearing in Washington, D.C. I hope you can still see the letters on the floor. There's another photo. So this is what we are talking about today. I'm very glad that this initiative has finally bloomed. Many congratulations to R.E.A.L for institutionalizing the movement in the international arbitration community. It's an idea that could not have been pushed further. When Leka reached out to me, she suggested that I share my personal experience to highlight racial diversity issues that plagues the international arbitration community. So I will tell you a short story of this boy on the screen. I'm the tiniest one sitting with my siblings on the far right. The English translation of the phrase on the plane is New York bound. So this was the first plane I took in my life. And little did I know that a few decades later, I would actually fly to United States to study law at Harvard. It was 31 years old, and I was a Korean lawyer working in a law firm for 5 years. So after finishing my master's and getting admitted to your bar, I returned to Seoul. So I was surprised to see the Korean clients routinely retain a traditional big international law firms for their arbitration cases. While I was a bit disappointed, I also saw as an opportunity to change the prevailing norm. So I started with one mantra, capability building of Korean lawyers to such a high level that they are wanted not only by Korean clients, but also by the clients from across the world. There was a time when I used to be the only Korean lawyer at international arbitration events, conferences, and the board. I was fortunate to have those opportunities, even if it may mean being a token Korean to make the conference look more international or diverse. I used them as springboard to showcase my work ethic, my keen interest, and my devotion to arbitration practice. I feel the problem of lack of diversity finds its root in the lack of access. So I decided to pass on my experience and knowledge to other Korean lawyers, not just within my firm, but also my competitors in the Korean legal market. My friends and colleagues were perplexed. They would ask me why I was so intent to sharing my know-how on an area that was in many ways exclusive to me in the region. They told me that I'll be better off keeping the understanding to myself to make the most of it. Similarly, my competitors would try to guess what I stood to gain from this exercise that I was not telling them. So they were equally astonished. So I was faced with the dilemma of to be or not to be. I thought about it and wondered what would be the better story to tell my grandkids. That I had all this opportunity and assessed that I have optimum use of, and then decided not to share with anyone because I feared competition, or that I shared my knowledge and experience with the legal community in Asia, which led to formation of thriving arbitration practice in Seoul. So I decided to go with the latter. When I look back now, it's a matter of immense happiness that I have opportunity to partake in development of industry in the region. Just like K-pop, K-drama, and the K-beauty products, K-lawyers have also become popular for their deep understanding of the subject and their work ethic. So the message I wish to convey through my story is that if the people are equipped with right tools, they can perform wonders. Hence, we must concentrate on building the capacity of the people from diverse backgrounds and give them access to knowledge and the procedures of international arbitration. It is through our excellence that clients will start noticing us. One of the biggest stumbling blocks of international arbitration lawyer from countries outside US and Europe face is that the client tend to overlook them. While this may be discouraging in my personal experience, if one is good at their work, sooner or later, they'll be noticed. Take, for instance, now world famous brand PTS. I'm going to share the screen. They have a large fan following globally. Moreover, their songs are not in English, and they were to expand their brand name. It is as Korean as it gets, but their novel approach to pop music has captured world fancy. Thus, while it may be true that traditionally client may have looked at what others would term as pale and male candidates for their arbitration, I will not call them stale because most of them are still laser sharp. Part of the reason is that these are the only players in the industry a few decades ago. The client's understanding of international arbitration, more often than not, is outdated. Therefore, to ensure their matters not left hanging by the cliff, the reflex reaction is to reach out the capacity or category of counsel and arbitrators that have been known to practice arbitration from before. Their excuse is that they do not want to take chances with millions of dollars at stake. Their arguments, both sadly and understandably, is that of the consumer at the marketplace. As example, when one goes to the multi-brand store to buy shoes, one tends to choose a brand they have traditionally won. Thus, even though they may be outdated, one opts for brand just for the sake of convenience, for brand image, or sometimes the prestige associated with it. A work customer, on the other hand, will survey every product and go for one that suits their needs best. Arbitration industry must take the effort showcased the notable work done by diverse lawyers to bring them into the limelight so that they do not go unnoticed. And this is where R.E.A.L could serve as medium. So the issue of diversity is the one that has been debated for several decades. The need for ours is not to draw attention to the issue of diversity, but to change the way we define diversity. In order to achieve diversity in true sense, we need to move away from the notion of diversity for the sake of diversity and encourage healthy diversity where peoples are respected and hired for unique skill their racial identity has provided them with. With issues transcending borders, there is a greater need for diversity in arbitration than any other branch of law. In a single case, we come across arbitrators, parties, counsels from various parts of the world. And we must think about using diversity as instrument to harmonize the problems presented by such a eclectic setting. Currently, international arbitration is on the cusp of new era where it appears that the virtual hearing may as well become a new norm. Over the last year, I have concluded several virtual hearings working with the co-counsel, parties, and arbitrators across the world. While the distance may have served a good excuse in the past, it can no longer be the case for ignoring the issue of underrepresentation of racial minorities, as technology has brought everyone closer than ever. We must take cognized and unique competencies of racially diverse practitioners and aid them in understanding the manner in which they can take advantage of prevailing market trends. Instead of relying on one-size-fits-all test to evaluate people, we must train ourselves to think along the lines of how a racially diverse workforce can enhance our capabilities. I earnestly hope that going forward, R.E.A.L is able to provide itself on uniting arbitration industry and ensuring that people from all backgrounds have access to the right tool, make a mark in the industry. On that positive note, I conclude. Thank you very much.
May I invite everyone to give a virtual clap to Kevin Kim. Kevin, thank you so much for those inspiring words. Thank you so much for joining us from Singapore. Thank you for staying up so late. It really means the world to us. Welcome, everybody. I'm Kabir Dagal, one of the co-chairs of R.E.A.L. And on behalf of our steering committee, please allow me to welcome you all to R.E.A.L. and thank you for joining us. Let me also acknowledge with gratitude and thanks the role of our steering committee, the R.E.A.L ambassadors, the R.E.A.L secretaries, and above all, to our members, our R.E.A.L members, our R.E.A.L allies. You know, one of our goals is to remain a safe space for everyone, and that is why we're not charging a membership fee to become a part of R.E.A.L. Everybody is welcome. One of our goals at R.E.A.L is to focus on intersectionality, right? And this is the intersection of race with another diverse attribute in our practice that often takes the form of gender, right? And the issue of gender representation is a perennial problem. You know, we must here acknowledge the tremendous work being done by our partners, organizations like Arbitral Women, the Equal Representation Pledge, Mute Off Thursdays, right? All these organizations are really making an effort towards gender equality and gender parity in international arbitration. We look at them as the gold standard and we hope to replicate those issues. And that takes us to our next speaker. If we're talking about the Middle East, right, and that's a fairly large region, there's one name that stands out in particular. It is our distinct honor and privilege to welcome Professor Dr. Naila Kumair Obaid from the Obaid Law Firm. Look her up on the internet. She is impressive. I could spend hours talking about her. She is a professor, a scholar, a counsel, an arbitrator whose expertise does not just extend to the Middle East or Europe, but the world at large. You know, I'm particularly privileged to introduce Professor Kumair Obaid because she started the issue of diversity at a time and in a region. This is a perennial problem, but definitely a problem in Asia, when people were not used to seeing women as judges. And her role and her experience in that capacity is really heartwarming. It gives us hope, it gives us inspiration. So on behalf of all of us, it is our honor to welcome Professor Kumair Obaid. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kabir, for your very kind introduction. I'm very pleased to be a part of this very successful event. Good morning and good afternoon to you all. It is a great pleasure for me to share a panel with distinguished colleagues, Judge Pillay and Kevin Kim, who gave us a very inspiring speeches. And it's an honor for me to be of the launch of R.E.A.L, on this emblematic day, Martin Luther King's Day. The establishment of arbitral body on racial equality for arbitration lawyers is certainly a welcome development in our field. I am sure it will be a fruitful and successful initiative. I have been requested to share my stories, including the difficulties, the challenges I faced as a multicultural person in international arbitration, and what we can do about it. Today, I will focus on my personal experience, namely the challenges I had to face as a woman and legal practitioner coming from the Middle East. More than 30 years ago, I decided to establish a law firm in the midst of the civil war in Lebanon, and then took a further step and decided to engage in a career in international arbitration. As a brief background, I was brought up in a family of doctors where girls and boys had to abide by the same rules and were given the same opportunities. When choosing our career path, my father hoped that I would become a doctor like him. To his disappointment, I decided to study law with the initial intention of becoming a judge. I was warned at that time that it would be very difficult as a woman to succeed in such a field, which was mainly reserved for men at the time. I faced various challenges. In a region where the power of decision-making is traditionally reserved for men, how would a woman be accepted as a judge, let alone a private dispute resolver? This was my first challenge. How would she convince the parties that she is as trustworthy and as professional as a man? This is also another challenge. It was not only the first woman to open a law firm at a very critical time in Lebanon, but also one of the first women to found a law firm in the Middle East. It was a courageous first step, full of uncertainties and risks. I still remember being in my office with my secretary, waiting for my first client. As a woman arbitrator who is originally from Lebanon, I also had many battles to fight. Like many women in the professional world, I had to reconcile being a mother, a wife, and a professional. In order to succeed, I had to put my work before my social life and even before my family when necessary. I will tell you that such an approach is difficult to reconcile with the traditional Middle Eastern culture. I remember when my name was first proposed as chairperson in a domestic arbitration 30 years ago, one co-arbitrator refused that the chairperson be a woman on the basis, and I quote, that the brain of a woman cannot rule like the brain of a man. The challenge became bigger when I started developing my career internationally, and when I eventually became an international arbitrator. At that time, acting as an arbitrator was a real novelty in the Middle East, even though a number of inspiring individuals, including women such as Samia Rashid and Hasib Al-Kayoubi, were pioneers in dispute resolution and had published thought-provoking articles in the arbitration field. To my surprise, while developing my career in the international sphere, I often faced the same prejudices and stereotypes that I encountered in my home jurisdiction. I will briefly share with you 3 stories of unconscious bias and diversity prejudices which I encountered over the year. The first story I remember when I was elected in 2017 president of the Chartered Institute of Arbitration, which is a 100-year-old institution. I was the first woman from the Middle East to hold this position and the third in the history of the institution. Such an achievement was a result of my involvement and hard work within the institution. I had established and chaired the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators Lebanon branch. I was also elected as the first woman trustee for the Middle East amongst 11 male colleagues trustees. Then I was elected as chairman of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators Board of Trustees. At the time, I was the first woman trustee for the CIR Board of Trustees since the creation of the institution in 1915. And yet, my election as new president prompted skeptic comments that a woman from the Middle East would be presiding the institution. Promoting diversity and competent people from different cultures, races, and regions is key. It is not only key generally, but it is key in international arbitration. During my tenure of president of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, I organized 3 flagship conferences in Dubai for the Middle East and Asia, in Johannesburg for the African continent, and in Paris for Europe and the Americas. It was the perfect occasion to start a dialogue between men and women of different cultures and races. My aim was to bring people together from different backgrounds over a common topic, the synergy between common law and civil law in international arbitration. My second story, diversity issues, prejudice, and unconscious bias also often arise at the appointment stage. While arbitral institutions play an important role in promoting diversity and thrive towards appointing arbitrators from different backgrounds and regions, this approach is unfortunately not always shared by parties. In an exit case in which I was appointed by the institution, a party filed a challenge on the basis of my country of origin, namely, I am Lebanese, even though I am a French-Lebanese citizen. Just one example of a regional bias with a wrongful prejudged perception. My third story. The third story relates to intimidating techniques used by a witness. In an arbitration case in which I was acting as a sole arbitrator, a witness who happened to be the chief police of the country of the seat of arbitration was called to testify. The witness was cross-examined by opposing counsel. During the break, this witness approached me and emphasized the importance of his position with the intent of directly intimidating me. I wonder if he would have done the same were a man chairing the tribunal. I had to set the witness straight. My final point is that international institutions and bodies have a key role to play in promoting diversity, fighting skeptic perceptions, and creating bridges between cultures, countries, and regions. International recognition often flows from international bodies. I have acted as a commissioner for the United Nations Compensation Commission for 5 years. I was appointed by Mr. Kofi Annan among 45 male colleagues, commissioners. I am currently member of the ICC Executive Board, the LCIA Court, and sitting on the board of the Cairo Regional Center for International Arbitration. I do believe that institutions bring legitimacy. It is true that the situation worldwide has positively evolved in terms of diversity. When I was elected trustee for the CIR Board of Trustees, I was the only woman. Now there are many other women sitting on the board from different regions and from different origins. The two elected presidents of the CIR for 2021 and 2022 are also women, which is a great development and in the right direction. I am sure that this is also the case in many other institutions. The launching of R.E.A.L is a great initiative and very timely. And the global pandemic that we are currently living, there is a need for greater international solidarity and collaboration. The number of disputes, in my view, will definitely rise, and there is a need for competent arbitrators from all continents with equal representation to resolve the disputes in their region and internationally. This is precisely where R.E.A.L can add tremendous value, and I certainly wish you all the success in your endeavors. With this note, I conclude my talk. Thank you all for joining us today.
Okay, everyone, that was phenomenal. Thank you so much. If you would join me again in giving a round of applause, both to Dr. Obaid, but to all of our speakers. I mean, the chat is indicative of your words being captured, but how they will motivate us forward. What we're going to do before we go into breakout session is do a poll. So if you would bear with us as we bring that poll up, we invite you to log your comments.
And we'll give it a few seconds so we complete and probably have the results ready. We'll wait for a sign from Mohammed.
And our hope is that these questions, preliminary of course, will help imbue the conversations you'll have in breakout session, not only from our phenomenal keynotes, but perhaps these as well.
And just by way of background, we'll share the results, or we'll use the results together with other materials and research currently undertaken by R.E.A.L, and you'll see some of the publications using this in the coming weeks.
While we're waiting for the responses to come up, I want to echo again on behalf of the steering committee. It has really been a labor of love, but we are so delighted to bring you R.E.A.L. And the truth is that we can only accomplish what we all believe in together. And so we're really delighted to have such illustrious ambassadors, but members and allies as well. So please make sure that you stay in touch. We will be in touch with you after this event to roll out different committee initiatives. And we're really looking forward to that. Okay, I think we're collecting many of the answers. There it is. Okay, let's do a quick snapshot before we move into breakout. Question number 1. Do you speak more than one language at home, or did you, while growing up? 69% in favor answered yes. 2. Have you ever observed inappropriate comments or conduct in a professional setting connected to gender or sexual orientation or ethnicity or race or other categories? Yes wins with 89%. Significant. Have you participated in an arbitration where a majority of the tribunal was a racial minority? No, at 85%. Question 4, have you participated in arbitration where an arbitrator had intersectional diversity, for example, female and a racial minority? No, at 59% leads. Although I'll note at 41%, there was yes. So intersectionality is a key topic we're also talking about alongside diversity and racial diversity. Finally, 5, has the transition to the virtual world in the COVID-19 pandemic helped to offset socioeconomic barriers? 54% with yes, which leads, which is interesting. I know we are all still in lockdown across the world, and so it's good to see a positive stat, but of course there is more we can do. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get everyone into breakout rooms. Stand by, randomized breakouts per Zoom. Please make sure that you introduce yourselves in brief. And also a happy new year to everyone. For many of us, this is the first time we're getting together like this. With that, I think we want to cede the floor for closing remarks. Closing, please.
Qian Bao, and if you can hear us.
I can hear you. Hello.
Hi, Qian. The floor is yours for the concluding remarks.
Great. I will be brief. I just wanted to say that it is truly an honor to be part of this inaugural event, which gives me hope for the transformation of our community. Not only were the keynotes inspiring and for many of us relatable, but personal. I have my own personal stories, but I will save my minutes and instead just take the time to celebrate all of you here today. Never have I seen such an attentive audience and such an active chat group. Clearly, so many of us have been waiting for this moment and for a forum like this, where we all look different, and that's normal. So with that, I close with the thanks for all of you from around the world to celebrate diversity, to celebrate us, and to join R.E.A.L, the tireless and fearless founders, to begin the dialogue in earnest. Thank you.
And we invite Nancy. Nancy, please, if you would take the floor and just offer a few brief remarks, it would be our pleasure.
Thank you, Rika. I do want to take this opportunity to thank the R.E.A.L co-chairs, Rika, Kabir, Karina, for conceiving of R.E.A.L, starting it, its website, the initiatives, this launch. Congratulations. This has been amazing. Thank you. Thank you to R.E.A.L partners, members, allies, and the steering committee. None of this would have been possible without all of your support. This was a global effort, and it shows by how fast we were able to put so much together. I believe in R.E.A.L because racial inequality is a global problem, as described by Judge Pillay and all of its permutations. And it will take a global effort such as R.E.A.L to begin to address the psychological harm and the economic disparities that it has wrought. When we all have work to do, we have work to do regionally and we have work to do domestically, which brings me back to Martin Luther King Day. And I think of his speech about I have a dream. When I think of that speech, it is a vision of a global world, because at its essence, racial inequality is limited not only to the one that's perpetuating it, but it's limited to the one that it is perpetuated against. That is not who we are as a species. We need to identify the groups that are being discriminated against, that are being cut out of the economic welfare, and make them visible again, as Judge Pillay said. And it was so powerful what she said, because when you're invisible as a victim, you're not heard, you're not seen, and you're not considered. And we need to stop that, because the challenges of the future demands that we help identify, engage, and build the best amongst us, no matter what our race is. And Kevin Kim said it the best when he said, we shouldn't be afraid of competition. We should embrace it, because not only does it bring out the best in us, as a group, we have more of a voice, we have more of a presence, and we can be seen. And anything else would be cheating. Anything else would be limiting. So, and when I think of the I Have a Dream speech, I think of racial inequality is ending it. The work we're doing in R.E.A.L to try to end it will help free us from the bondage that's limiting us as a human species from engaging the best amongst us. And if you cannot join a global effort such as R.E.A.L, or actively, or some of the regional domestic things that we're doing in the US and across the world to try to address this problem, then I like what Dr. Kumail Obeid said about working, how she was able to build her career to get to a platform where she's then able to reach out and help those that are coming afterwards. So I encourage all of you here, I congratulate you, applaud you, encourage all of you here to join R.E.A.L, become active in its initiatives and those of its partners to address this problem, because the future needs all of us. Thank you.
Well, folks, thank you very much. We hope whoever can join us for section 2, please join us. And in the meantime, let's get real. Let's do this together. Join us, sign up. Thanks, everybody. Let's commemorate Martin Luther King Day.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.